is a compound in the heart of Beijing that most people never see. Its name is Zhongnanhai, a walled complex of lakes and gardens and elegant buildings, sitting just west of the Forbidden City. It is where China's leaders live and work, where the decisions that shape the lives of more than 1 billion people are made behind closed doors. It is a world within a world, sealed from the city outside, governed by its own rhythms, its own protocols, its own silence. In the early 1950s, a boy grew up inside these walls. He attended the August 1st school, a school named for the date of a famous communist military victory. A school that occupied the former palace of a queuing dynasty prince. A school nicknamed by those who knew it, the Cradle of Leaders. The students who passed through its gates were not ordinary children. They were the sons and daughters of the men who had built the People's Republic of China, who had fought in the revolution, who had walked the long march, who had defeated the nationalists and proclaimed a new nation in October 1949. These children grew up together, lived in the same compounds, summited the same resorts, formed bonds that would last their entire lives. They were called princelings, the children of the revolution, born into a world of privilege that very few Chinese people could even imagine. Among them was a boy, born on the 15th of June 1953, the son of one of the revolution's most celebrated figures. His name was Xi Jinping. Tonight, we follow this child from the walled gardens of Zhongnanhai, through the chaos and cruelty of the Cultural Revolution, through 7 years in a cave, through decades of patient climbing, to the very pinnacle of power in the world's most populous nation. Slowly, calmly from the very beginning. Close your eyes if you wish. We have a long journey ahead. We continue our story. To understand Xi Jinping, you must first understand the man who shaped him. His father, Xi Zhongxun. Xi Zhongxun was not simply a government official. He was a revolutionary. A man who had joined the communist cause as a teenager in the 1920s, who had fought alongside Mao Zedong in the mountains and caves of Yan'an during the Long March, who had helped build the People's Republic of China from the ruins of civil war. By the early 1950s, Xi Zhongxun was one of the most respected figures in the party. Vice Premier of China. A man with the ear of Mao himself. A man of genuine revolutionary credentials that no one could question. And young Xi Jinping grew up in the shadow of all of that. His father was a man of principle, of simplicity, of frugality, despite his high position. Xi Zhongxun lived modestly. When he bathed, he would not throw away the water. He made his sons use it after him. Sometimes young Xi wore his sister's floral shoes, dyed black to look more appropriate. These were lessons not of poverty, but of discipline, of the belief that a revolutionary does not live for comfort, that a leader serves the people, not himself. Young Jinping absorbed these lessons as children absorb everything, not through instruction, but through observation, through the daily texture of life with a father who believed deeply in what he stood for. But there was something else Xi Zhongxun carried, something that would eventually consume the entire family. He was a reformist, a man who occasionally thought differently from the leadership, who was willing to say so. In the world of Chinese communist politics, that was a dangerous quality to have. In 1962, when Xi Jinping was just 9 years old, his father was purged, accused of supporting a novel that the party considered politically problematic, stripped of his positions, sent to work in a factory in the city of Luoyang, far from Beijing, far from power, far from his family. The prince had become something else entirely, and his son was left to navigate a world that had suddenly become very much more dangerous. In our next chapter, that danger becomes total. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is May 1966. Xi Jinping is 12 years old. Mao Zedong has launched what he calls the Cultural Revolution, a campaign to purge China of what he sees as capitalist and traditional elements that have crept back into the party and into society. It will become one of the most violent and chaotic periods in modern Chinese history. Schools are shut down, teachers are attacked by their own students, intellectuals are publicly humiliated, party officials who are deemed insufficiently revolutionary are dragged before crowds, forced to confess to crimes they may or may not have committed, and stripped of everything. For the Xi family, the Cultural Revolution is not an abstract political movement. It is a personal catastrophe. Red Guards, gangs of young revolutionary students, armed with Mao's little red book and the authority of the moment, they come to the Xi family home. They search it, they ransack it, they take what they want. Xi Jinping's half-sister, a young woman named Heping, is a student at a military academy. She cannot survive what is happening around her. She hangs herself. His mother, Qi Xin, is forced to attend a public struggle session to stand before a crowd and denounce her own husband, to call him an enemy of the revolution, to say the words that every part of her must have refused to believe. His father, Xi Zhongxun, is imprisoned in 1968, held without charge, without trial, without any clear end in sight. Xi Jinping is 15 years old. His family has been destroyed by the very revolution his father helped to build. And now comes the final blow. Mao has ordered that the educated youth of China's cities be sent to the countryside to live among the peasants, to be re-educated through labor. Xi Jinping is among them. In our next chapter, the boy from the Cradle of Leaders arrives in a place that could not be more different from everything he has known. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is 1969. Xi Jinping is 15 years old. Mao Zedong has issued a directive. The educated youth of China's cities must go to the countryside. They must live among the peasants, work alongside them, learn from them, be re-educated through physical labor. It is called the Down to the Countryside movement. Millions of young people are uprooted from their homes and sent to remote corners of China, away from their families, away from their schools, away from everything familiar. Xi Jinping is assigned to Liangjiahe, a tiny village in Shanxi province, hundreds of miles southwest of Beijing, carved into the dusty Los hills of northern China. A place so remote and so poor that it barely appears on any map. He boards a train. He later recalled that on the entire train, everyone was crying. But he was smiling. Not from happiness, from calculation. Beijing in 1969 was a dangerous place for the son of a purged official. The Red Guards were still active. Staying in the capital meant continued exposure to persecution. As he later said, if he had not left, he did not even know if he would survive. After 3 days of travel by train, then by truck, then on foot, he arrives in Liangjiahe. What he finds shocks him completely. The village is desperately poor. The peasants live in cave homes, dug into the hillside, Yodong ancient dwellings of packed earth and stone. Dark inside, cold in winter, hot summer. There is no running water, no electricity. The food is sparse. The work is backbreaking. And the fleas within days the city boys are covered in bites, their bodies erupt in sores. Xi Jinping lasts a few months. Then he runs. He makes his way back to Beijing, back to the only world he knows. In our next chapter, we follow what happens when he is caught and what brings him back to the cave. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. Xi Jinping has run back to Beijing. He cannot bear the poverty, the fleas, the darkness, the distance from everything he knows. But Beijing in 1969 is not a safe place for the son of a purged official. He is caught, arrested as a deserter from the countryside program, sent to a work camp, made to dig ditches as punishment. His aunt and uncle come to persuade him, to explain that going back to Liangjiahe is the only reasonable choice, that there is nothing for him in Beijing, that survival means acceptance. He returns to the cave, and this time, he stays. 7 years in total, from 1969 to 1975. The cave is a yodong, a traditional dwelling carved directly into the Los hillside. Cool in summer, cold in winter, dark at almost all hours. A felt mattress on a heated brick bed, propaganda posters on the earthen walls, a few books, a gas lamp, and not much else. The work is relentless. Before sunrise, he is in the fields. After sunset, he is still there, hauling grain, digging irrigation channels, carrying loads that exhaust men who have done this work their entire lives. He later recalled that when he arrived, his fellow laborers rated him a 6 out of 10, not even as high as the women, he said. But he does not give up. He adapts, he strengthens. He learns to endure in ways that the pampered boy from Zhongnanhai could not have imagined. And at night, after the work is done, he reads. He has carried books to Liangjiahe, more books than he can hold. Marx, Engels, the classics of communist theory. But also Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, Tolstoy's War and Peace. Sometimes he walks 10 kilometers to a neighboring village just to borrow a book. He reads by the light of the gas lamp until his eyes give out. In the darkness of the cave, something is forming, not the boy who arrived, trembling and covered in flea bites, but something harder, something patient, something that will not be broken. In our next chapter, that transformation continues, and the young man begins to do something unexpected, to lead. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. Xi Jinping has returned to Liangjiahe, punished, humbled, with nowhere else to go. And so he makes a decision that will define everything that follows. He stops fighting it. Not with resignation, not with defeat, but with something more deliberate, a conscious choice, to embrace the life in front of him, to find within it whatever can be found. He later said that when he arrived, he was 10 years old in his thinking. When he left 7 years later, he was a man. The change does not happen overnight. It happens slowly, through the accumulation of 10,000 small moments. The moment his body finally grows strong enough to carry the loads without stopping. The moment a village elder tells him something true about the land, and he listens, really listens, without the pride of a Beijing boy who thinks he knows better. The moment he realizes that the peasants of Liangjiahe are not people to be pitied. They are people to be respected, people who have survived hardships that he is only beginning to understand. He learns their dialect. He learns to read the soil. He learns how water moves through the dry hills of Shanxi. He learns patience, a patience that has no end date, no promise of reward, just the work itself, day after day, season after season. He later said something that those who study him have returned to again and again. Knives are sharpened on stone, people are refined through hardship. It is not a complaint, it is not bitterness, it is an observation, almost a philosophy. Something is being built in this cave, in these fields, in these long silent evenings with a gas lamp and a book. Something that no school in Beijing could have taught him. In our next chapter, the young man from the cave begins to lead. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. The seasons change in Liangjiahe. Winter comes hard to the lowest hills of northern Shaanxi. The wind cuts through the cave walls. The fields freeze solid. The work does not stop. And Xi Jinping does not stop. He has made his peace with this place, not a peace of surrender, but a piece of engagement, of genuine curiosity about the world he has been dropped into. The peasants of Liangjiahe have been farming these hills for generations. They know things that no book has ever recorded, how to read the weather from the color of the sky at dusk, how to conserve water in a landscape that barely receives any, how to coax food from soil that seems to have almost nothing left to give. She watches them. He asks questions. He listens to the answers without interrupting, without the impatience of someone who thinks they already know. The villagers notice. They are accustomed to the sent-down youth from the cities, young people who arrive with their own ideas about how things should be done, who struggle, who complain, who count the days until they can leave. She is different. He works as hard as any of them. He talks to the old men who sit in the evenings outside their cave homes. He listens to their stories, their memories of famines and floods of years when the harvest failed and people ate bark from trees. He is building something in these conversations, a picture of China that no official document has ever fully captured. The China that lives, not in the party congress halls of Beijing, but in the cracked hands of a peasant woman carrying water up a hillside before dawn. He later said that his years in Liangjiahe were the foundation of everything that it was here. He learned what it meant to serve the people, not as a slogan, but as a daily practice. In our next chapter, he attempts something that others have told him is impossible. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. There is something Xi Jinping wants more than anything else in Liangjiahe. He wants to join the Chinese Communist Party. It seems like a simple thing, a formality perhaps for the son of a revolutionary hero, for a young man who has worked the fields alongside the peasants for years, who has shown loyalty, who has shown endurance. But it is not simple at all. His father, Xi Zhongxun, is still a disgraced official, still under the shadow of political persecution, still imprisoned. In the logic of the Cultural Revolution, the sins of the father belong to the son as well. The family of an enemy is itself suspect. Xi Jinping applies to join the Communist Party. He is rejected. He applies again. Rejected again. He applies a third time, a fourth, a fifth. Each time, his application moves up through the local party structure. Each time, it comes back denied. His father's name, his family's history, too much, too complicated, not safe to approve. He applies 6 times, 7, 8, 9 rejections. Another man might have stopped, might have concluded that the party did not want him, that the system had made its decision. Xi Jinping applies a 10th time. This time, something is different. A new commune secretary is taken over. A man who has watched Xi work, who has seen his capability and his commitment firsthand, who is willing to look at the man in front of him rather than the name of his father. The application is forwarded to the county committee. In early 1974, Xi Jinping is accepted into the Chinese Communist Party. He is 20 years old. He has been rejected 10 times. He has never stopped applying. It is perhaps the most revealing single fact about him. In our next chapter, the new party member is given his first real leadership role. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is 1974. Xi Jinping is 20 years old. He has been in Liangjiahe for 5 years. He is now a member of the Chinese Communist Party, and the villagers have chosen him as their party branch secretary. It is his first leadership role, his first experience of genuine responsibility, not for himself, but for others. The village has problems, the same problems that have plagued it for generations. Water. The villagers of Liangjiahe collect their drinking water from shallow roadside pits, muddy, unreliable, dangerous in ways that people who have no other choice learn to accept. She organizes the villagers. They work for more than 2 weeks, digging a deep well in the frozen ground. A well that provides clean water for drinking and water for irrigation. The well is still used today. Then there is the problem of energy. The villagers burn wood and coal for cooking and heating. But fuel is scarce in these dry hills. Every winter, the question of warmth is a serious one. Xi has read something in a newspaper he obtained from the city, an account of rural communities in Sichuan province using biogas, methane produced from organic waste, a clean, renewable source of energy that requires no coal, No wood, no fuel at all, beyond what the land already produces. He travels to Sichuan himself, learns the technology, returns to Liangjiahe, and organizes the construction of the village's first biogas pit. It works. The first biogas lamp in all of northern Shanxi is lit in Liangjiahe. The province eventually builds 42 more biogas pits based on this model. Xi Jinping is 21 years old. He owns nothing. He lives in a cave. He has no formal position beyond a small village in a forgotten corner of Shanxi. But he has learned something that will stay with him for the rest of his life. That leadership is not about speeches or titles. It is about problems and solutions, and the willingness to do the work that others have decided cannot be done. In our next chapter, the door finally opens, and Xi Jinping leaves the cave behind. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is 1974. Xi Jinping is 20 years old. He has been in Liangjiahe for 5 years. He is now a member of the Chinese Communist Party, and the villagers have chosen him as their party branch secretary. It is his first leadership role, his first experience of genuine responsibility, not for himself, but for others. The village has problems, the same problems that have plagued it for generations. Water. The villagers of Liangjiahe collect their drinking water from shallow roadside pits, muddy, unreliable, dangerous in ways that people who have no other choice learn to accept. She organizes the villagers. They work for more than 2 weeks, digging a deep well in the frozen ground, a well that provides clean water for drinking and water for irrigation. The well is still used today. Then there is the problem of energy. The villagers burn wood and coal for cooking and heating, but fuel is scarce in these dry hills. Every winter, the question of warmth is a serious one. Xi has read something in a newspaper he obtained from the city, an account of rural communities in Sichuan province using biogas, methane produced from organic waste, a clean, renewable source of energy that requires no coal, no wood, no fuel at all, beyond what the land already produces. He travels to Sichuan himself, learns the technology, returns to Liangjiahe, and organizes the construction of the village's first biogas pit. It works. The first biogas lamp in all of northern Shanxi is lit in Liangjiahe. The province eventually builds 42 more biogas pits based on this model. Xi Jinping is 21 years old. He owns nothing. He lives in a cave. He has no formal position beyond a small village in a forgotten corner of Shanxi. But he has learned something that will stay with him for the rest of his life. That leadership is not about speeches or titles. It is about problems and solutions, and the willingness to do the work that others have decided cannot be done. In our next chapter, the door finally opens, and Xi Jinping leaves the cave behind. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. It is 1974. We continue our story. It is 1975. Xi Jinping is 21 years old. He has been in Liangjiahe for 6 years. He is the village party secretary. He has dug wells and built biogas pits and learned more about China than most officials will ever know. And now a door opens. Mao Zedong has created a new category of university student, the worker, peasant, soldier student. Young people from the countryside and the factories and the military who are selected, not by examination, but by recommendation from their local communities. The villagers of Liangjiahe recommend Xi Jinping. He is accepted to Tsinghua University in Beijing, one of the most prestigious institutions in all of China, sometimes called the MIT of the East. He packs his few belongings. He says goodbye to the cave, to the fields, to the villages who have become, in ways he could not have anticipated, his people. He will later say that he left his heart in Liangjiahe. At Tsinghua, he studies chemical engineering, though later records will list his degree differently. The details of that period are like much of Xi's life, carefully managed. What is clear is this: he is back in Beijing, back in the city of his childhood, but he is not the same person who left it 6 years before. The boy who once lived in the walled compound of China's ruling elite has spent 6 years in a cave, has been humbled by poverty and labor in ways that very few of the people around him at Tsinghua have experienced. He graduates in 1979. China is changing around him. Mao has died in 1976. The Cultural Revolution is over. A new leader named Deng Xiaoping is steering China in a different direction, toward economic reform, toward opening, toward a new idea of what China can become. And Xi Jinping is ready to begin his climb. In our next chapter, that climb begins, slowly, patiently, in the places no one is watching. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. It is 1979. Xi Jinping has graduated from Tsinghua. He is 26 years old. China is changing rapidly around him. Mao Zedong is gone, dead in 1976. The Gang of Four, the radical faction that drove the worst excesses of the Cultural Revolution, has been arrested and put on trial. Deng Xiaoping has emerged as China's new paramount leader, a pragmatist, a reformer, a man who famously said, It does not matter if a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice. China is opening. Special economic zones are being created along the coast. Foreign investment is being invited in. A country that was closed to the outside world is beginning, cautiously, to look outward. Xi Jinping begins his career in the most modest possible way. He works as a secretary in the General Office of the Central Military Commission, a bureaucratic role, administrative, unglamorous, far from the centers of decision-making. In 1982, he makes a choice that surprises people who know him. He volunteers to leave Beijing, to go to Zhengding County in Hebei Province, a rural, relatively poor county south of the capital. He will serve as deputy secretary and then secretary of a county that almost no one outside of Hebei has ever heard of. It seems like a step backward, away from the capital, away from the corridors of power, away from the connections that advance careers in any political system. But Xi Jinping has a different understanding of advancement. He has learned in Liangjiahe that real knowledge comes from the ground up, from governing actual places, from solving actual problems for actual people. In Zhengding he works, he improves the local economy, he attracts investment, he builds a reputation as someone who gets things done without corruption, without drama, without putting himself first. In 1985, he moves to Fujian Province on China's southeastern coast, directly across the water from Taiwan. He will spend 17 years there, moving steadily up, vice mayor governor, always competent, always patient, always watching, always learning. 17 years in a province most of the world cannot find on a map. But China is being built in places like Fujian, and then Xi Jinping is building himself in the same patient way. In our next chapter, he finds something else in those years by the sea. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. There is something else that happens in these years along the coast of Fujian. Something personal. Something that has nothing to do with party rankings, or provincial economies, or the slow accumulation of political capital. In 1987, Xi Jinping marries. Her name is Peng Liyuan, and she is in many ways the more famous of the two at the time of their wedding. Peng Liyuan is a singer, a celebrated folk singer in the People's Liberation Army's song and dance troupe. Her voice is known across China. She performs at the Spring Festival Gala, the most watched television event in the country. She is beloved, a household name, in a way that Xi Jinping, a relatively obscure provincial official, is decidedly not. When they are introduced by mutual friends, she is the star. He is, to most people, simply a government official from Fujian. They marry quietly. They have a daughter, Xi Mingzi, who will later study at Harvard University under an assumed name, quietly without drawing attention, in the way her father has always preferred. There had been an earlier marriage, brief, ended after 3 years. The details are rarely discussed in official accounts. But with Peng Liyuan, something different takes hold, a partnership that will last through the decades of climbing that lie ahead. She will eventually step back from her performing career as his role grows larger. And when he finally stands on the world stage, she will be beside him, elegant, composed, a presence that China's state media will celebrate as a new kind of first lady. But in 1987, none of that is known yet. There is only a young couple, an official and a singer, building a life together in a coastal province, far from the center of power. In our next chapter, that center of power begins to come closer. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is 2002. Xi Jinping has spent 17 years in Fujian province. 17 years of patient work of building infrastructure, of attracting investment, of governing. Without scandal or drama, or the kind of corruption that has consumed so many of his contemporaries. He is transferred to Zhejiang province as party secretary, the most powerful position in the provincial hierarchy, above even the governor. Zhejiang is different from Fujian, wealthier, more dynamic. A province that has produced some of China's most successful private entrepreneurs, the home of Alibaba, of a new kind of Chinese economy that Mao could never have imagined. She governs Zhejiang for 5 years. The economy grows. His reputation grows with it. Careful, competent, incorruptible. And then in 2007, something unexpected happens. The party secretary of Shanghai, a man named Chen Liangjiahe, is removed from office, arrested on corruption charges. One of the most senior officials in China brought down in a very public fall. Shanghai needs someone trustworthy, someone whose reputation is completely clean, someone the party can point to and say, this man is not like the others. They choose Xi Jinping. He spends only a few months in Shanghai, but those months matter enormously. Because also in 2007, the Communist Party holds its 17th National Congress, and Xi Jinping is elected to the Politburo Standing Committee, the 7 most powerful people in China. From village secretary in a cave to the innermost circle of Chinese power. He is 54 years old. He is on the shortlist to lead the world's most populous nation. In our next chapter, the final steps of the climb begin. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is March 2008. Xi Jinping is 54 years old. He has just been elected to the Politburo Standing Committee, the innermost circle of Chinese power. And now he takes the next step. He is elected Vice President of China. For the first time in his life, he is truly visible on the world stage, not as a provincial official, not as a party functionary, but as the man who is widely understood to be the next president of China. The role of vice president in China's system is both ceremonial and strategic. He travels, he meets foreign leaders, he represents China at international gatherings. He begins to build the relationships that a president will need. He visits the United States, he travels to Europe, to Africa, to Latin America, to the countries of Southeast Asia that China is increasingly drawing into its orbit. Foreign leaders study him carefully. They're accustomed to Chinese officials who speak in careful, formulaic language, who reveal nothing of themselves, who seem almost designed to project an impression rather than a personality. Xi is somewhat different. He is warmer than expected. He makes jokes. He remembers details from previous conversations. He has a way of making the person across the table feel that they are being genuinely listened to. In October 2010, he is named Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission, the body that commands the People's Liberation Army, the most powerful military force in Asia. This appointment, more than any other, signals what is coming. In China's system, whoever controls the military controls the country, and the Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission is next in line to control everything. The cave in Liangjiahe is 40 years behind him. The summit is very close now. In our next chapter, he arrives. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. It is November 2012. Beijing is preparing for one of the most important events in Chinese politics, the 18th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. Every 5 years, the party Congress convenes. Senior leaders retire. New leaders are elevated. The balance of power shifts in ways that are carefully choreographed behind closed doors. This Congress is different from most that have come before it, because this Congress will transfer power from one generation to the next. From Hu Jintao, who has led China for the past decade, to the man who has been waiting patiently in his shadow, Xi Jinping. The transition is not a surprise. It has been understood for years that this moment was coming, that Xi was the chosen successor, that the party had decided. But knowing something is coming and witnessing it are two different things. On the 14th of November 2012, Xi Jinping is elected General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, the most powerful position in the most populous nation on earth. He stands before the cameras in the Great Hall of the People. Beside him are the 6 other men who will form the Politburo Standing Committee, the innermost circle. He speaks carefully of the dreams of the Chinese people. of a China that is strong and prosperous and respected, of a great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. He calls it the Chinese dream. And in March 2013, he becomes president of China. The boy from the cave has arrived at the summit. In our next chapter, we see what he does with the power he has spent a lifetime accumulating. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. Xi Jinping has become president of China, General Secretary of the party, Chairman of the Central Military Commission. He holds every position that matters. Every lever of power is in his hands. And his first major act as China's supreme leader is not about foreign policy, not about the economy, not about Taiwan or Tibet or the South China Sea. It is about corruption. China in 2013 is a country where corruption has become endemic, where officials at every level of the party and government have been enriching themselves for decades, taking bribes, accepting gifts, building personal fortunes from public resources. It has become, in many ways, the accepted cost of doing business in China. The way things work, the water everyone swims in. Xi Jinping announces that this is over. He calls it the campaign against corruption, and he uses a phrase that captures its scope with remarkable precision. We will go after both tigers and flies. Tigers, the powerful, the senior officials, the generals, the ministers, the men whose positions once made them untouchable. Flies, the local officials, the petty bureaucrats, the small-scale predators who steal from ordinary people, one bribe at a time. Both tigers and flies. No one is exempt. No rank provides protection. No connection is strong enough to stop an investigation. What follows is staggering in its scale. More than 1 million officials are investigated and punished. In the first few years, generals who commanded hundreds of thousands of troops are arrested and tried. A former member of the Politburo Standing Committee, one of the 7 most powerful men in China, is convicted and imprisoned. It has never happened before in the history of the People's Republic. Critics say the campaign is also a purge, that Xi is using corruption charges to remove political rivals, to consolidate his own power under the cover of cleaning up the party. Supporters say China needed exactly this, that without it, the party would have rotted from within. Both things may be true. In our next chapter, Xi turns his attention to the world beyond China's borders. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. Xi Jinping has a vision for China's place in the world. Not a China that reacts to what others do. Not a China that accepts the international order designed by others after the Second World War. Not a China that is content to be a factory for the rest of the world. A China that leads, that shapes, that builds, that projects its influence across continents in ways that no Chinese leader since the emperors has dared to imagine. In 2013, he announces the vision that will become the defining foreign policy initiative of his era, the Belt and Road Initiative. It is named deliberately, evoking the ancient Silk Road, the network of trade routes that connected China to Central Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and Africa for more than 1,000 years. When Chinese silk and porcelain moved west, and gold and spices moved east, when China was the center of the world's greatest trading network. Xi proposes to rebuild that network, not with caravans crossing deserts, but with ports, railways, highways, power plants, fiber optic cables, the infrastructure of a modern world. China will finance the construction. Chinese companies will build it. And the nations along the route will be connected to China in ways that go far beyond trade. Dozens of countries sign on. In Africa, in Southeast Asia, in Central Asia and Europe, ports in Pakistan and Sri Lanka, and Greece and Kenya are built or expanded with Chinese money. Critics call it a debt trap. They say China lends money that poorer nations cannot repay. And when they cannot repay, China takes control of the assets it helped to build. Supporters say it is simply infrastructure investment of a kind the Western world stopped providing decades ago. Whatever it is vast, it is ambitious, and it signals clearly what Xi Jinping believes China's role in the world should be. Not a follower, a leader. In our next chapter, that ambition collides with the desires of people who want something China's system cannot easily give. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. There is a city on the southern coast of China that has always been different from the rest. Hong Kong. For more than a century and a half, it was a British colony, a city of skyscrapers and harbor lights, of English common law and a free press, and an independent judiciary, a city where people could speak their minds without fear, where information flowed freely, where the rules were different from those on the mainland. In 1997, Hong Kong was returned to China under an arrangement called One Country, Two Systems. The city would be part of China, but it would keep its own laws, its own courts, its own freedoms for 50 years. For more than 2 decades, the arrangement held, imperfectly with tensions, but it held. Then in June 2019, something breaks. a proposed law that would allow suspects to be extradited from Hong Kong to the mainland to face trial in Chinese courts under Chinese rules. The people of Hong Kong take to the streets, not in the thousands and the millions. Week after week, the protests continue, growing larger, more determined, more confrontational. Umbrellas and helmets and handmade shields against police and riot gear. The extradition bill is withdrawn, but the protests do not stop. The demands have grown: full democracy and investigation into police conduct. A future that looks different from what Beijing has planned. Xi Jinping watches, and in June 2020, he acts. The national security law is imposed on Hong Kong without consultation, without a vote in the city's legislature. It criminalizes secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces, with penalties of up to life imprisonment. Within months, the opposition is gone. Protest leaders are arrested. Independent newspapers are shut down. The city that was different is becoming less different by the day. The world condemns it. Xi Jinping does not change course. In our next chapter, he makes his most consequential decision yet. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is March 2018. Xi Jinping has been president of China for 5 years. General Secretary of the party, Chairman of the Military Commission. China's constitution has always placed a limit on how long a president can serve. 2 terms, 10 years. And then, by law, the office must pass to someone else. It was a rule introduced after Mao, after the chaos and catastrophe of a leader who held power for too long, who could not be removed, who made decisions that cost millions of lives. The term limit was a lesson written into law, so that China would never go through that again. In February 2018, the Communist Party's Central Committee proposes an amendment to the Constitution. The removal of the 2-term limit on the presidency. The National People's Congress votes on the amendment, 2,952 votes in favor. 2 against, 3 abstentions. The limit is gone. Xi Jinping can now remain president of China for as long as he chooses, or for as long as the party allows, which in the system he has built may amount to the same thing. The world reacts with alarm. Western governments issue statements. Analysts write that China is moving toward a form of personal rule not seen since Mao. In October 2017, before the amendment, Xi had already achieved something that underlined his extraordinary position. His ideology, Xi Jinping thought, for the new era of socialism with Chinese characteristics, was written into the party constitution. Only Mao Zedong had achieved this honor while still alive. Deng Xiaoping's thought was enshrined only after his death. Xi Jinping has placed himself in the company of the founder of modern China. In our final chapter, we look at the world he has made and what comes next. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is March 2018. Xi Jinping has been President of China for 5 years. General Secretary of the party, Chairman of the Military Commission. China's constitution has always placed a limit on how long a president can serve. 2 terms, 10 years. And then by law, the office must pass to someone else. It was a rule introduced after Mao, after the chaos and catastrophe of a leader who held power for too long, who could not be removed, who made decisions that cost millions of lives. The term limit was a lesson written into law so that China would never go through that again. In February 2018, the Communist Party's Central Committee proposes an amendment to the Constitution. The removal of the 2-term limit on the presidency. The National People's Congress votes on the amendment, 2,952 votes in favor, 2 against, 3 abstentions. The limit is gone. Xi Jinping can now remain president of China for as long as he chooses, or for as long as the party allows, which in the system he has built may amount to the same thing. The world reacts with alarm. Western governments issue statements. Analysts write that China is moving toward a form of personal rule not seen since Mao. In October 2017, before the amendment, Xi had already achieved something that underlined his extraordinary position. His ideology, Xi Jinping thought, for the new era of socialism with Chinese characteristics, was written into the party constitution. Only Mao Zedong had achieved this honor while still alive. Deng Xiaoping's thought was enshrined only after his death. Xi Jinping has placed himself in the company of the founder of modern China. In our final chapter, we look at the world he has made and what comes next. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is March 2018. Xi Jinping has been President of China for 5 years. General Secretary of the party, Chairman of the Military Commission. China's constitution has always placed a limit on how long a president can serve. 2 terms, 10 years, and then by law, the office must pass to someone else. It was a rule introduced after Mao, after the chaos and catastrophe of a leader who held power for too long, who could not be removed, who made decisions that cost millions of lives. The term limit was a lesson written into law so that China would never go through that again. In February 2018, the Communist Party's Central Committee proposes an amendment to the Constitution. The removal of the 2-term limit on the presidency. The National People's Congress votes on the amendment, 2,952 votes in favor, 2 against, 3 abstentions. The limit is gone. Xi Jinping can now remain president of China for as long as he chooses, or for as long as the party allows. We arrive at the end of our story. It is 2026. Xi Jinping has been the supreme leader of China for more than 13 years. The country he governs is not the country he inherited. China in 2026 is the world's second largest economy, in some measures the largest. Its military budget has more than doubled under Xi. Its navy has grown faster than any in the world. 2 aircraft carriers now sail under the Chinese flag. A 3rd is under construction. China has bases abroad in Djibouti on the Horn of Africa, in ports across the Indian Ocean. Its infrastructure stretches from Southeast Asia to East Africa, to the ports of Southern Europe. The Belt and Road Initiative has connected dozens of countries to Chinese finance and Chinese ambition. And yet, China faces challenges that no amount of military spending can resolve. Its economy has slowed the property sector, once the engine of growth has buckled under the weight of its own excess. Young people who expected the prosperity their parents knew are finding a different reality. Taiwan remains unresolved, the island that China claims as its own, that has governed itself for more than 70 years, that the United States has pledged to defend. The question that Xi Jinping has said must not be passed to the next generation. The relationship with America has hardened into something that looks to many observers like the early stages of a new Cold War. Trade restrictions, technology bans, military posturing across the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. And in 2026, as the Middle East burns and the world's attention is consumed by the war in Iran, China watches carefully, balancing, calculating, buying Iranian oil through back channels, planning a summit with Trump that keeps being delayed. Xi Jinping has always played the long game in Liangjiahe. He learned to think not in days or months, but in years and decades. He has said that China is on a great journey, a journey toward rejuvenation, toward the restoration of the place in the world that China held for most of recorded history, at the center leading the Middle Kingdom. Whether that journey ends where he believes it will, whether the world accepts the China he is building, whether Taiwan remains peaceful, whether the economy recovers, whether the party he has made, so completely his own, will outlast the man himself. These questions remain open. What is not open is the journey that brought him here. From the walled gardens of Zhongnanhai, where a boy grew up in the shadow of revolution, through the chaos of the Cultural Revolution, through the loss of his father, his sister, his childhood, through 7 years in a cave in Liangjiahe, hauling grain, digging wells, reading Hemingway by the light of a gas lamp. Through 10 rejections from the party, he refused to stop believing him. Through 17 years in the provinces, patient, invisible, building, learning, waiting. Through the corridors of power in Beijing and Shanghai, through the vice presidency, through the succession, through the summit. Xi Jinping has been one of the most consequential figures of the 21st century. A man who survived everything that was thrown at him, who waited longer than anyone expected, who climbed further than almost anyone thought possible. Tonight we have followed that journey together, slowly, calmly, from the very beginning. Now rest, The story has been told. Sleep well.